The clatter of my keys hitting the polished entryway table echoed unnervingly in the cavernous silence of the house. Usually, arriving at Richard and Margaret's meticulously kept colonial for Thanksgiving week meant being assaulted by a cacophony, the blare of a football game, the clatter of pans from the kitchen, Margaret's overly loud greetings attempting to mask her perpetual disapproval. Today, there was nothing. Just the oppressive quiet of a house deliberately emptied. My husband Tom and I were supposed to drive up together, but a last-minute client emergency had him staying late in the city, promising to arrive by dinner. "Go ahead, babe," he'd urged. "Mom's expecting you to help with the pies." Now, standing alone in the chillingly still foyer, a knot of pure dread tightened in my stomach. The air was cold, the heating clearly turned down low, and the scent of Margaret's signature potpourri was conspicuously absent. My name is Sarah, and for the 6 years I'd been married to Tom, I'd learned to navigate his parents' subtle exclusions and veiled criticisms with a forced smile and unwavering politeness. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. "Hello?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the stillness. "Margaret? Richard?" No answer. I walked further in, my boots clicking too loudly on the gleaming hardwood floors. The living room was pristine, untouched. The dining room table, usually set days in advance for holiday meals, stood bare. Panic began to claw its way up my throat. Had something happened? An accident? A sudden illness? I pulled out my phone, ready to dial Tom, when a flash of white on the kitchen island caught my eye. It was a note, propped against the ridiculously expensive espresso machine Tom had gifted his parents last Christmas. My name was scrawled across the front in Margaret's perfect looping script. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it. "Sarah," it began, deceptively casual. "Change of plans. Richard won the raffle at the club. Surprise trip to Hawaii. Such a whirlwind leaving this morning. Tom knows, meant to tell you. Couldn't pass it up, needed the break. Lily's upstairs in her room, being quiet as usual. The sitter canceled last minute, so unreliable. Knew you wouldn't mind holding down the fort until Tom gets there tonight. Food in freezer. See you next week. XXM Hawaii. A surprise trip. Tom knows." Lily's sitter canceled. Each phrase felt like a tiny poisoned dart. Lily, my 7-year-old niece, Tom's sister's daughter, who had been living with Richard and Margaret for the past year while her parents worked through a messy, protracted custody battle. Lily, the sweet, anxious child who hadn't spoken a single word since witnessing one of her parents' particularly explosive arguments 6 months prior. The child Margaret constantly referred to as a challenge, and such a burden, usually within my earshot. They hadn't just gone on vacation. They had abandoned their selectively mute granddaughter, leaving her in my care with barely a footnote, timed perfectly so I couldn't refuse. The cruelty, the sheer calculated callousness of it, stole my breath. They hadn't forgotten to tell me. They had deliberately not told me, trapping me here with a responsibility they clearly resented. I sank onto a kitchen stool, the cold chrome biting into my legs. The silence of the house pressed in, no longer just empty, but malevolent. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Lily. I was alone. Completely alone with a child who wouldn't speak, in a house that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a beautifully decorated prison. My phone buzzed. Tom. Finally. I snatched it up, ready to unleash my fury, my confusion, my hurt. But the text wasn't what I expected. "Hey babe, crazy day. Just boarding the plane now. Surprise upgrade. Talk when I land. Love you." Attached was a selfie. Tom, grinning broadly, giving a thumbs up. Behind him, clearly visible through the airplane window, wasn't the tarmac of our local airport, but the unmistakable turquoise water and swaying palm trees of a tropical locale. He wasn't delayed. He was already there. With them. The lie was so blatant, so effortless, it knocked the remaining air from my lungs. This wasn't just Margaret's manipulation. Tom was complicit. He'd known all along. They'd planned this together, leaving me behind to deal with the child they found inconvenient while they escaped to paradise. The carefully constructed facade of my marriage, the illusion of partnership I'd clung to despite his parents' constant undermining, crumbled into dust around me. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to flee. But upstairs, a little girl was waiting, a child even more abandoned than I felt in that moment. I tried calling Tom again, knowing it was futile. Straight to voicemail, the cheerful message jarring against the cold reality. I texted him, "Where are you? Your parents left. Lily is here alone." No response. I tried Margaret's cell, Richard's, Melissa's, Tom's sister, Lily's mother. All went straight to voicemail or rang endlessly. They were unreachable, cocooned in their tropical escape, deliberately cutting off contact. I looked around the immaculate kitchen, a monument to Margaret's obsession with appearances. Not a speck of dust, yet devoid of any real warmth. It mirrored my relationship with them, polished on the surface, cold and empty underneath. How had I not seen it? The subtle digs about my less prestigious job as a kindergarten teacher compared to their lawyer daughter-in-law. The helpful suggestions about my wardrobe, my cooking, my parenting aspirations, or lack thereof, according to Margaret. The way Tom always sided with them, smoothing things over, telling me I was too sensitive, making me question my own perceptions. It was classic gaslighting, and I'd fallen for it, desperate for the family acceptance I craved after losing my own parents years ago. My savings weren't substantial, teaching doesn't pay extravagantly, but Tom and I had been diligently putting money aside for fertility treatments. We'd been trying for a baby for 2 years, a source of quiet heartache Margaret often prodded with intrusive questions about my biological clock. A sudden, sickening thought pierced through my numbness. I quickly logged into our joint savings account. The balance wasn't zero, not completely, but it was significantly lower than it should have been. A $7,000 withdrawal dated 2 days ago, labeled travel agency. They hadn't just used their money, they'd used our money, the funds earmarked for building our future family, to finance their escape and my abandonment. The sheer audacity left me breathless. There was no question of staying now. No debate. I couldn't remain in this house, complicit in their deception, waiting for my husband to return from his lie-fueled vacation. But Lily, I couldn't just leave her. Climbing the stairs, my legs felt heavy, each step an effort. I found Lily's room at the end of the hall, the door slightly ajar. Peeking inside, I saw her sitting on the floor, surrounded by building blocks, constructing an elaborate tower with intense concentration. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge my presence. Her silence felt different now. Not just shyness, but a heavy cloak of something else, something imposed. "Lily?" I whispered, stepping into the room. She flinched almost imperceptibly, but didn't look up. Her small hands continued placing blocks with meticulous care. This was the reality they'd left me with. A silent child, a looted bank account, and a marriage built on sand. I couldn't fix the marriage, couldn't retrieve the stolen money, but I could choose how to handle this moment, how to treat this child who was as much a victim as I was. I sank to the floor a few feet away, leaning my back against the wall, and simply watched her build. No demands, no pressure, just quiet presence. Maybe, just maybe, that's what we both needed. The first few hours were a strange dance of silence and observation. I stayed in Lily's room, sometimes reading a book I'd brought, sometimes just watching her play. She moved with a quiet intensity, her small world contained within the perimeter of her brightly colored rug. She never made eye contact, never uttered a sound, but I started noticing subtle shifts in her body language. A slight tensing of her shoulders when I moved too quickly, a momentary pause in her play when I sighed. She was aware, hyper-aware, locked inside a silence that felt increasingly unnatural. Hunger eventually gnawed at me. "Lily," I said softly, keeping my voice even. "I'm going downstairs to find us something to eat. Would you like to come with me?" No response. Her focus remained resolutely on her block tower. I hesitated, unsure of the protocol Margaret had left, if any. Was I supposed to leave her alone? Force her to come? There were no instructions, no emergency numbers, nothing but that glib note about freezer meals. I decided against forcing her. "Okay, sweetie, I'll bring something up for you." Downstairs, the freezer yielded a collection of Margaret's perfectly portioned, vacuum-sealed casseroles, labeled with dates and instructions. It felt wrong somehow, eating their pre-prepared food after what they'd done. Instead, I rummaged through the nearly empty pantry and fridge, managing to cobble together grilled cheese sandwiches and a can of tomato soup, simple comfort food. I brought a tray upstairs, placing it near her rug. Lunch is here if you're hungry, Lily. I sat on the floor again, eating my own sandwich slowly. After a few minutes, her eyes flickered towards the tray, then back to her blocks. Progress, however small. She didn't eat while I was there, but when I returned an hour later after exploring the silent house further, noting the distinct lack of any personal touches for Lily, just functional furniture and neatly stored toys she clearly never played with, the sandwich was gone, the soup bowl empty. That afternoon, desperate for connection, I pulled out my sketchbook and charcoal pencils, remnants of an artistic passion I'd mostly abandoned after marrying Tom. He'd always subtly discouraged it, calling it a nice hobby but not a serious pursuit. Sitting on the floor, I began sketching the room, the slanted afternoon light, the intricate block tower, the small, still figure of Lily absorbed in her play. Slowly, tentatively, Lily edged closer, her eyes fixed on my moving pencil. She sat beside me, watching silently as the image took shape on the page. When I finished the main sketch, I held out a pencil to her. Want to add something? Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She hesitated, then took the pencil, her small fingers surprisingly firm. She didn't draw on my sketch, but on the blank space beside it, she drew a simple stick-figure girl standing alone next to a large, imposing house. No smile, no sun, just the lone figure. My heart ached. I pointed to the figure. Is this you? She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. I pointed to the house. She nodded again. Then she drew bars on the windows of the house. My breath caught. This wasn't just silence. This felt like imprisonment. What had been happening here when I wasn't around? What stories were locked behind those silent lips? I needed to understand, not just for Lily, but for myself. Over the next day, I focused entirely on Lily, pushing aside my own hurt and anger. I created a routine, mimicking the structure I knew helped children feel secure in my kindergarten classroom. We had set times for meals, quiet play, reading stories, even though she gave no outward reaction, and outdoor time in the neglected backyard. I spoke to her constantly, narrating our activities, asking gentle questions without expecting replies, filling the silence with a calm, steady presence. I avoided mentioning Tom or his parents, creating a temporary bubble where their betrayal couldn't reach us. During our backyard exploration, Lily pointed excitedly at a half-hidden bird feeder hanging from a maple tree. It was empty, covered in cobwebs. Margaret, despite her perfectly manicured flower beds, clearly didn't extend her care to the local wildlife. We went inside, found some old birdseed in the garage, cleaned the feeder, and filled it. As we hung it back up, Lily's eyes met mine for a fleeting second, a spark of connection that felt momentous. Later, while looking for art supplies in a closet overflowing with Margaret's discarded decorating projects, I stumbled upon a box tucked away on the top shelf labeled Lily's Things. Inside weren't just clothes she'd outgrown, but items that felt significant. A well-loved stuffed bunny with one ear missing, finger paintings filled with vibrant color, a stark contrast to the somber stick figure she'd drawn for me, and a small, intricately carved wooden necklace shaped like a bird. Lily, who had followed me silently to the closet, gasped audibly when she saw the necklace, reaching for it with trembling fingers. As she clutched it, her knuckles white, I saw a flicker of the girl from the finger paintings, the child who existed before the silence descended. "Was this yours?" I asked gently. She nodded vigorously, tears welling in her eyes for the first time since my arrival. She held the necklace tightly, refusing to put it down for the rest of the day. Who had taken it away? And why? That evening, I decided to push a boundary. I found Margaret's expensive espresso machine, the one Tom had given her, and despite my minimal barista skills, attempted to make us fancy hot chocolates, complete with whipped cream from a can I found expiring in the back of the fridge. I brought the steaming mugs into the living room where Lily was curled on the sofa, clutching her bird necklace. I sat beside her, leaving space between us. "It's not as good as the coffee shop," I admitted, taking a sip, "but it's warm." Lily watched me over the rim of her own mug. She took a tentative sip, then another. A tiny milk mustache appeared on her upper lip. I resisted the urge to wipe it away. We sat in comfortable silence for a long time, the only sound the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock I now realized I'd never heard chime on previous visits. Margaret must have kept it silenced. As I sipped my hot chocolate, watching the way Lily held her necklace like a talisman, a disturbing memory surfaced. It was from a family dinner about 4 months ago. Lily had been wearing the necklace then. She'd tried to show Margaret something she'd built, accidentally bumping the table and jostling Margaret's wine glass. Margaret hadn't yelled, but her voice had dropped to that icy, controlled tone that was far more frightening. "Elizabeth," she'd said to Lily's mother, who was visiting that weekend, "that child needs firmer boundaries, and that trinket is hardly appropriate." I remembered Elizabeth quickly taking the necklace from a crestfallen Lily, murmuring something about keeping it safe. Lily hadn't spoken a word since. Had Margaret, in her passive-aggressive way, convinced Elizabeth that the necklace, perhaps a gift from the father Margaret disapproved of, was somehow connected to Lily's difficult behavior? Had they taken away not just her comfort object, but her voice? The possibility felt monstrous. The connection between the necklace and Lily's silence felt too strong to be coincidental. While Lily napped fitfully on the sofa later that afternoon, clutching the wooden bird, I did some digging. I remembered Tom mentioning his sister Melissa's contentious divorce involved accusations of emotional manipulation on both sides. A quick online search of county court records brought up publicly available filings. Skimming through the documents, my blood ran cold. Melissa's estranged husband, David, accused Margaret and Richard of actively interfering, coaching Melissa, and attempting to alienate him from Lily by making false claims about his stability. He specifically mentioned Margaret confiscating gifts he'd given Lily, including a hand-carved necklace, claiming they were inappropriate or distracting. Margaret's affidavit in response dismissed his claims as baseless accusations from a disgruntled spouse, painting herself as a concerned grandmother trying to provide stability. But reading it now, knowing what I knew, the manipulation was clear. They hadn't just neglected Lily, they'd actively participated in the parental conflict, likely exacerbating the trauma that led to her silence. And the necklace. It wasn't just a trinket. It was a tangible link to her father, a source of comfort Margaret had deliberately removed. My anger simmered. This wasn't just about Brady abandoning me or them neglecting Victor. This was about them potentially causing psychological harm to a vulnerable child to control a situation. I looked over at Lily, asleep on the sofa, her face smoother, less anxious than when I arrived, the bird necklace rising and falling gently with her breath. Protecting her became my primary focus. Revenge on Brady and Elaine could wait. Lily's well-being couldn't. That evening, I decided to create a haven for Lily within the cold, impersonal house. We dragged blankets and pillows into the living room, building a cozy fort around the coffee table. Inside, with flashlights casting dancing shadows, we read stories. Lily still didn't speak, but she leaned against my shoulder, pointing at pictures, her eyes bright with interest. Later, tucked into her bed, with the bird necklace safely under her pillow, I sat beside her until her breathing evened out. Before leaving the room, I noticed her drawing from the afternoon lying on her nightstand. She had added something new. Beside the stick figure girl and the barred house, she had drawn a second, slightly larger stick figure holding the girl's hand, and this time, the girl had a tiny, hesitant smile. Progress. Downstairs, I documented everything meticulously. The court records, the timeline of Lily's silence coinciding with the necklace confiscation, Margaret's dismissive comments, the state of the house, the lack of food and proper medication timings, based on pill containers. I scanned everything, emailing copies to myself and storing backups on a secure cloud drive Victor would have approved of. I wasn't sure what I would do with the information yet, but I knew I needed it. Knowledge was power, and I finally understood the game Margaret and her family played. A game of control, manipulation, and utter disregard for anyone who didn't fit their narrative or serve their interests. They had underestimated me, just as they had underestimated Lily. They assumed we were both silent, powerless. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Sunday morning arrived with a fragile sense of hope. Lily seemed calmer, less withdrawn. She followed me downstairs, silently accepting the pancakes I made, using ingredients I'd bought, refusing to touch Margaret's freezer stash. She sat at the kitchen table drawing while I cleaned, the bird necklace now proudly worn around her neck. The house, warmed by actual heating turned up to a reasonable temperature and filled with the smell of breakfast, felt less like a prison. Around mid-morning, my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered cautiously. "Sarah, it's Melissa." Lily's mother sounded flustered, slightly breathless. "We just landed back in the States. Mom's phone isn't working. Is Lily okay? Is Dad—" Her voice trailed off, likely remembering my urgent messages about Victor's fictional decline. The carefully constructed web of lies began to fray. They weren't due back until Monday evening. Something must have spooked them. "Lily is fine, Melissa." I kept my voice neutral. "And Victor passed away Saturday night." The gasp on the other end was sharp. "What? Saturday? Why didn't you tell us? We would have come home." "I left messages," I repeated calmly. "For everyone. You were unreachable." "Mom she thought you were exaggerating about Dad," Melissa stammered. "And Brady? Oh God, Brady needs to know." "Brady knows everything," I said, the double meaning intentional. "He knew about the cruise, he knew about leaving Lily, he knew about the money, he just didn't expect consequences." There was a choked sob. "Where is he now? Is he with you?" "No, Melissa. Your brother isn't here. And frankly, after discovering he used our joint savings to fund this trip with his colleague Hannah while leaving me stranded, I have no interest in seeing him." The mention of Hannah clearly landed. "Hannah? He told us she won the trip, that it was a work obligation." The lies were unraveling fast. "Look, Melissa," I softened my tone slightly, thinking of Lily upstairs. "Your parents and your brother made choices that have serious implications. Victor changed his will. He documented everything. There's going to be a legal process." "Legal?" Her voice rose in panic. "What are you talking about?" "I think," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "that you need to talk to your parents and your brother, and perhaps consult an attorney. Patricia Winters was handling Victor's estate." I gave her Patricia's number, knowing the formidable lawyer would handle their inquiries with icy professionalism. After hanging up, I felt drained but resolute. The confrontation I dreaded was happening piecemeal, fragmented by distance and their own dawning panic. Upstairs, I heard a small sound, a hesitant shuffling. Lily stood in the doorway, watching me, her eyes wide. She held up her drawing from yesterday, the one with the two stick figures holding hands. She pointed to the figure representing me, then to herself. Then, she pointed to the barred house and shook her head emphatically. My heart swelled. No words needed. She understood. She felt safe. That afternoon, as Lily and I were building a new block tower in the living room fort, bathed in the warm glow of the fireplace I'd finally figured out how to light, she suddenly looked up at me, her expression serious. She touched the wooden bird necklace, then pointed towards the kitchen where Margaret's icy voice had delivered so many subtle wounds. She opened her mouth, took a breath, and spoke, her voice soft but clear, the first words I'd ever heard her utter. 7 words that changed everything. Grandma said bad people take kids' voices. The 7 words hung in the air, simple, devastating, and utterly clarifying. Grandma said bad people take kids' voices. It wasn't just about the necklace. It was a deliberate, cruel manipulation. Margaret hadn't just dismissed Lily's comfort object. She had woven a narrative of fear, associating speaking up, perhaps specifically about things Lily witnessed or felt, with being bad or attracting bad people. She had effectively, intentionally, silenced her own granddaughter to maintain control, perhaps to prevent Lily from revealing uncomfortable truths about the family dynamics or her parents' conflict. My blood ran cold, then hot with fury. This was beyond neglect. It was calculated psychological abuse. Lily watched my face, her large eyes searching mine, perhaps gauging my reaction. Would I dismiss her words? Would I get angry? I knelt beside her, meeting her gaze gently. "Oh, Lily," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Grandma was wrong. Very, very wrong. Bad people try to take voices, but brave little girls like you know how to keep them safe inside until it's okay to let them out." I touched her necklace. "And brave people help them find their voice again. You are not bad for wanting to talk. Your voice is important." Relief washed over her small face, so profound it almost brought me to tears. She leaned forward and wrapped her thin arms around my neck in a fierce hug, the first physical affection she'd initiated. We stayed like that for a long moment, two survivors clinging together in the wreckage left by others. That night, fueled by righteous anger and a fierce protective instinct towards Lily, I organized the final pieces of our counteroffensive. I compiled a concise summary of the financial exploitation and medical neglect, attaching key documents. I transcribed Lily's 7 words and noted the context, adding my own observations about Margaret's manipulative behavior. I emailed the entire package securely to Patricia Winters and, after getting Patricia's explicit okay, to Agent Michael Dawson at the state's Elder Abuse and Child Protective Services units, referencing my previous conversation with Diane Fletcher. I wasn't just seeking legal recourse anymore, I was ensuring accountability on all fronts. The next day, Monday, passed in a blur of quiet activity. Lily, seemingly lighter now that her secret was shared, chattered intermittently, her voice rusty but growing stronger. We played games, drew pictures, hers now featuring smiling figures and sunshine, and waited. The call came late in the afternoon. It was Patricia. "They know," she said simply. "Margaret, Richard, and Brady arrived at my office this morning demanding answers about the will. I informed them of the evidence, the video testimony, and the fact that reports have been filed with Adult and Child Protective Services regarding potential abuse and neglect." There was a pause. They did not take it well. Their lawyer contacted me an hour ago requesting an urgent settlement meeting. "What kind of settlement?" I asked, glancing at Lily, who was happily drawing a picture of a bird flying free from a cage. "They're offering to relinquish all claims to Victor's estate and establish a substantial, independently managed trust fund for Lily's therapy and education in exchange for you dropping the abuse complaints." It was tempting, a clean break, guaranteed security for Lily. But it wasn't just about the money or escaping a legal battle. It was about ensuring Margaret and Brady faced actual consequences, ensuring they couldn't simply buy their way out of accountability. "No deal, Patricia," I said firmly. "Victor wanted accountability. Lily deserves justice. Let the investigations proceed." Patricia sounded pleased. "My thoughts exactly. I've already informed their counsel. They are less than pleased." I spent the evening making arrangements for myself and Lily. I contacted Melissa's estranged husband, David, providing him with the evidence of Margaret's interference and Lily's statement. He was simultaneously furious and immensely grateful, promising to take immediate legal action to secure primary custody with my full support and testimony. I booked a hotel room for the next few nights and arranged for a child psychologist specializing in selective mutism to meet with Lily as soon as possible. When Tom finally called that night, his voice laced with panic and false contrition, after undoubtedly speaking with his parents and their lawyer, I let it go to voicemail. His message was a rambling mix of apologies, accusations, and pleas for me to fix this. I deleted it without listening to the end. His voice, like his parents', no longer held any power over me. The next morning, carrying only our bags and Lily's box of rediscovered treasures, we walked out of the cold, silent house for the last time. Lily paused on the porch, looked back at the imposing colonial facade, then turned to me, her small hand finding mine. "Is Grandma a bad person?" she asked, her voice small but clear. I knelt beside her. "Sometimes, sweetie, people who are supposed to love us make very bad choices that hurt others. It doesn't mean you are bad, it means they need to learn to be better." As we drove away, heading towards a hotel, a therapist appointment, and an uncertain but hopeful future, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt a profound sense of peace. Victor had gotten his justice. Lily had found her voice. And I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, forged in the crucible of betrayal but tempered by compassion and the fierce determination to protect an innocent child. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free, ready to write my own story, in my own voice. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, unexpected alliances and our own inner strength can lead us towards the light. If you've ever felt silenced or underestimated, know that your voice matters, and finding it is the ultimate victory. What part of Sarah and Lily's story resonated most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Please like this video if it touched you, share it with someone who might need this message, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and empowerment. Until next time, stay strong and keep speaking your truth.